all of you here tonight. And it's a special night, of course, because we present the world premiere of Chocolate Oyster. It's a very inventive and very funny film about our city and the people in it. And it's one we liked a great deal when looking at the film for the selection. And I'm so happy we have it, especially as a world premiere. And we're really very delighted to have with us the director, Steve Jaggi. Give him a very warm welcome.
Hi everyone. Can you hear me? Yeah. It's incredibly humbling to be here. This film has been such a labor of love and such a passion project for both myself and everybody involved with it. It is a very experimental film, as you'll see, and afterwards, feel free to ask us about how we made it. But part of that, the style of filmmaking means that it's so much of myself as it is so much of the actors and the crew are in this film. So it really does mean a lot to all of us, and we're just so humbled and that you programmed us. So thank you very much. And Christine, the producer, is here with me, and most of the cast are here, and we look forward to hearing from you afterwards at the Q&A.
Steve and the film team will be back at the end of the screening to take questions, so please stay in your credits, please stay in your seats.
Producer kind of dude.
Oh no, Henry here. Henry's a writer, man. Sick. You guys should definitely talk.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Grab a chair, bro.
The best baker in the East, bro.
Oh,
Ask the guys right here.
There you go. Here, grab this, yeah. Dude, so you writing?
Yeah, sweet man.
We should write.
Yeah, mate.
Oh yeah, we should do.
Yeah, just got back from London, I guess.
Nice.
Yeah, just did a.
Anything else?
Probably not.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was a small show, but
Okay.
I'm working on some stuff now.
Right,
but,
right.
I'd love to chat to you about it sometime. Get ready to beers.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, just same time.
Yeah, man.
Yeah, man. Yeah. Cool.
Yeah. Thanks, bro.
Back in a sec.
Oh, it was my round.
Beers.
Well, listen, this is a bit of a sausage fest. I'm gonna go. That chick with the huge tits. I'm gonna go talk to her. I'll be back in a few minutes.
Such a douche, man.
Smoke bomb.
Man. He has a point, though. Where have you been?
Probably cruise. Go on, man. Cigarette?
Yeah, let's do it.
Hey, where's Olma?
He was a wanker.
Sausage fest, apparently.
Cheers, bro.
Don't worry, man. Just come on. Okay.
Here we go. Steve Jaggi, thanks very much.
Thank you.
Do you want to introduce the team?
Yeah, absolutely. So, Christine Luby, wonderful producer. Anna Lawrence and Rosie Lord, the two stars. And then in no particular order, Stephen Sewell, of course, who needs no introduction. Asia Powers, editor. Ryan Harrison, male lead. Dan Battenberg, cinematographer. Stephanie King, who played Beatrix in the film. Cameron Kuhn, who played herself. Did you have a character name? You were playing Millie. There you go. Sorry, even I can't remember character names. Laura Bunting, who played McKinley.
Is that my name?
That was your name in the film, yeah. And there's a million other people to introduce. We're probably running out of time, but composer, colorist, composer, David Webster. Yeah. Other editor, stills.
That was great, well done. So, we're going to take your questions in a moment. I'll begin with one for you, Steve. Tell us about the construction of the film. I imagine you said it was an experimental film and improvised to an extent, workshop with the cast. How much do you think the actors anticipated what they're going to see here tonight?
Well, I mean, I'm sure they'll jump in a second, but I don't think they had any idea what they're going to see tonight. I didn't let them see any of the footage, so the only people who had seen the film were myself and the editors and the composer. But the style of filmmaking is called retroscripting. So there was a script for the whole movie, but there's no dialogue in it. And so myself and the cinematographer and the crew knew what was going to happen. But with the actors, the process was that we would workshop their backstory. So as an example, with the opening scene, we've got two of them breaking up. We had kind of workshopped them meeting as characters and going on dates, that kind of thing. When they turned up, they had no idea that they were going to be breaking up. And then the process in this sort of film is that the actors each get kind of opposing direction. So Anna knew that she had to break up with him, but Anna had no, and Tim had no idea. He thought that he was going to try and convince her to move in together, and so that's how you create friction. Sort of filmmaking, yeah. But all the dialogue is improvised. Yeah.
No, I loved it so much. And it was really funny thinking about that first scene as well, because when we would, I'm not sure this is like a bit of a secret, I'm going to tell you anyway. When we had our phones, that was actually Steve directing us. So getting those messages, it was like, okay, now say this. No, so it was a really incredible experience. Had so much creative freedom, and I mean, God, I wish that every acting job was like that, honestly. No, it was a good time. Next question.
We'll take your questions. We don't. Go ahead.
It's interesting to see like so many different stories at once, and so how in such a Sydney story you balance the different stories. Like what was the choice in the Sydney stories, and how did that work out? Kind of, because there are so many interesting stories that you can tell about what happened in the film, and the LA story was really interesting. So how did you balance that with the other stories?
The question is, how do you balance all these stories?
Even though the dialogue was all improvised, all the scenes and the dramatic arcs were really tightly scripted. So it took me about 6 months to, and just thousands of Post-its on a wall, trying to figure out how to actually do this. I would say like 85+%, is what we intended to shoot. The only thing that didn't work out for us was the ending, so we had to go back and reshoot the ending. Just by the nature of the improvisation meant that all the kind of very finely woven, intricate pieces, every time you do a scene and the actors take it in one direction, by the time you have like 25 scenes, it doesn't end up where you want to. Everything was very planned in every scene. There's a lot of things I was trying to say, but I suppose my goal with this film is kind of born out of frustration, for lack of a better word. Like, my day job is producing movies. I've had the good fortune to produce a couple movies that have been relatively successful. But I can't afford to buy a house in Bondi. And I think I'm friends with everybody who worked in the film. Like, we're all friends, so we'd often sit down and all whinge about how Sydney on the one hand is like one of the best places on earth. On the other hand, it really sucks. Particularly if you live in the eastern suburbs. And so the idea behind this film is not to pass judgment on anyone, but it's meant to just be kind of, I suppose, a microscopic view of what it's like to be a millennial living in Bondi or the east.
Millennial.
What were the director and cinematographer trying to achieve with the slow shifting focus?
It's a question about the slow shifting focus.
Everything is a stylistic choice. I'll hand it over to Rhiannon in a second, but we purposely shot the entire film on one lens, which is a very old, ancient lens from the 1950s. And we were really inspired by earlier work from Jean-Luc Godard, or of course the very early mumblecore films from the Duplass brothers. So the kind of ethos of this film was that the entire film would be made as if we were just using equipment that we had lying around the kitchen table, which for shooting the film was pretty much true. Obviously post-production we had to use all the toys, but for shooting the film, the idea was it was shot on one very basic ancient camera. And that lens had a very shallow focal point. And so the inspiration was, kind of 1960s French films. I don't know if Rhiannon wants to expand on that.
Yeah, look, I think, first of all, it was a very interesting experience working particularly with something that was retroscripted. So Steve and I, we did sort of chat a little bit about, what the character's overall arc would be, but to be honest, pretty much I'd rock up and I was in very much the same situation that the actors were in. So what was particularly interesting was often as a cinematographer, and something that you develop with the director is you can decide on a point of view in the scene. And what was sort of difficult and also fun was that I really didn't have a point of view at all. My job was purely to document it as action, played out in front of me. And there are things that I missed. There are things that I picked up on that you might not have, I may not have focused on if that we had had more of an agenda. And I think ultimately because I haven't really seen this film finished like that, what's really interesting to me now is the way that we chose to film it very much set up some interesting choices for Adrian to cut it, because, choosing different moments, it was kind of, it was sort of almost up to, Adrian and Steve to then make some more of those decisions that sometimes would be made when you shoot the film.
Yeah, it was a really, we spent so much time then once, it had been so totally scripted and so specifically planned out, and then once we got into the editing room, it was like breaking it down all over again and going over, and we had like hundreds of versions of this, but we finally got it down to something that I think's pretty good. I liked watching it. So, congrats, my friend.
That's got to be one of the most heroic opening shots of all time. I just wanted to talk to the director and the editor about the courage to hold for that long.
I'm going to pass it to Adrian, but before I do, I just want to talk very quickly about editors, just as a segue. I must say there are two editors in the film. Paul Murphy at the very end there, who started off, and he's fantastic. Red Obsession, fantastic documentary editor, but unfortunately and rather selfishly, a few weeks into editing, he had to go to New York, and he took a paying job over this job. He started off, and then the wonderful Adrian Powers, who's a dear friend of mine, stepped in and finished the film off. So I just wanted to make sure that Paul wasn't left out there. But I'm going to hand this over to Adrian because I have to be honest with you, I designed that opening shot specifically to be the way it is. It was all planned, and it hangs for almost 15 minutes. And then we edited the film, and I lost confidence. And I thought, fucking nobody's going to watch this film. It's a disaster. So Adrian convinced me to keep it.
Yeah, thank you for asking that. I'm very vindicated, because for like 2 years now, I've been like, God, I love this opening shot. And people might hate it, but I think it's cool. So let's put it in the movie. And I'm just really happy that you kept it. So, cheers.
The entire movie is every scene never had more than 3 takes. Some scenes are just a 1 take. The opening scene did have 3 takes, but we used the first take. So often we do additional takes just so we had little bits and bobs to pick up in the edit. But obviously the first scene there were no cuts. So that's the very first take we did on the first day of photography of the entire project.
The question is, what's next for you as a director?
Well, I'm not a career director, so yeah, it's a horrible question. I don't know if I'll ever be allowed to direct again because, nobody would pay for this film to get made. Nobody paid me. So I'll probably go back to producing. My day job is producing kids' films, very good kids' films, but a very different, thing to this. But I mean, I'd love to direct a film again, and I love working with everybody. What was great about this movie was every single person in this film, every single person you see up here, is a personal dear friend, and it was such a joy to make this movie because it really is wonderful to work with people you love, and it's such a collaborative process, particularly a film like this. So.
Sorry, could you repeat that? It's about Steve's acting in the film.
Yeah, I hope you wouldn't recognize that. I see that. Yeah, thanks. I'll kind of use that just very quickly to segue into, because somebody at some point will ask how long it took to make this movie. This movie took 4 years to make, and the reason for that is, and if you were like that young lady there who's obviously got eagle eyes, damn her, I noticed I have a small cameo in the film. I'm much skinnier and better looking there. So we shot the film, and then obviously editing took a long time, but what also happened is, quick story, I got salmonella, food poisoning, and from that got a very rare condition called reactive arthritis, which meant that for almost a year I couldn't do anything. So I couldn't walk for a couple months, as crutches and blah blah, and obviously put on a lot of weight, blah blah. So long story short, because of that, we took like a year's hiatus in post-production on this movie. But thankfully everybody stuck by me and we were able to come back in and continue on with it. So.
Can you talk to us? I thought it was a fantastic film. I was
Thank you.
absolutely captivated in France. It's the first time I've seen such a wonderful education of our contemporary life. I actually happen to do this on the beach. The way that you described it was just magnificent. Thank you. Why did you choose black and white? What was it about using monochrome that you wanted?
The question is, why did you choose black and white?
Yeah, a conscious decision from day one, and I spoke with Rhiannon about it. And what we did is, as well as an aside, we actually, because everything's shot digitally now, even though we all used old lenses, it was still a digital camera. So Rhiannon actually flipped the camera so that it was actually captured in black and white, so we couldn't change our lines. Being a little meta and probably a bit wanky, the conceit was that we wanted to strip away any distractions and of modern life, even though it's all about modern life. We consciously wanted people to focus in purely on the journey of the characters. So yeah, it's a conscious decision from day one.
It looks much cooler on Instagram.
It looks better on Instagram. I mean, it is. Sorry, I shouldn't say. I mean, it's being super wanky, but what we're trying to do is there's a number of layers of commentary, and we are hopefully it came through that we're making comments on social media and the way that pop culture and social media are trying to, basically influence the way young people live or the way they want to live. So I suppose it was like that juxtaposition between, Ellie's scene. So there's a scene with Ellie where she's in the bed and she's looking on her phone and she's obviously on Instagram. And so the idea being kind of, you don't actively see it on screen, but you see the kind of reaction to pop culture driving them towards these lives that they think they're owed. But, obviously the reality is they can never get there. And so yeah, hopefully that feeds into answering your question somewhat. Ish.
How bad was the chocolate oyster?
Absolutely, yeah. You hit the nail on the head there. So a chocolate oyster is disgusting, full disclosure.
Try it, mate.
I tried one. But like everything in the film, and correct me if I'm wrong, Anna, but you hadn't tried one before we shot the scene, right? That was the first time. Yeah. First and last time. But again, the conceit there, is that Bondi in particular, and Sydney these days, is like a chocolate oyster, which is it's you get two of the most beautiful things in the world, but when you put them together, it's you can't live with that.
Can you interpret the last scene, staring at the Ferris wheel?
I can, and actually I can't take credit for it because I'm not smart enough. Adam Buston, who's somewhere in the audience here, who is a fantastic scriptwriter in his own right, came in and provided some guidance because, like I said, the ending didn't change. So everything is as we planned right up to the ending. And there was a storyline with Taylor, Rosie Lord's character, where it went in a very different direction, and it worked, but it wasn't. It took away from like the rest of the message in the film, so we decided to go with a different type of ending. But the idea being that Anna's character, she's looking at the Ferris wheel, and it's like a hamster wheel. It's just going round and round and round. So the idea being the two characters, one decides to grow up and get a day job, and the other one's going to live this endless life of trying to chase the impossible dream. Living the dream, yeah.
Go ahead.
Oh, me?
Yeah.
Thank you. Favorite part of the film, was that something that you had decided prior to shooting, or was that going to be part of your post?
The question is about the score and whether its prominence was decided before shooting or only in post.
So I'm going to go with the composer, who did a magnificent job. Charlie Meadows as well. The score is really beautiful. I love the score. FY, it's available on Spotify for next week. But the score is beautiful, and you did such an amazing job with it. It's exactly what I imagined, but 100 times better than that. But do you want to say a little bit about your creative process?
Yeah, sure. Well, we had a very collaborative process. So yes, the scoring process did start in post. So I didn't actually see the film until it was locked off. Which means that there were no picture changes, so I was actually working to the finished visuals. And, well, Charlie and as soon as I saw the film, I kind of had a sense after talking to Steve. We talked about the influences of the French New Wave and Godard, and I have been to film school, so I've studied Godard films, and sort of that idea of music kind of randomly coming in and out and sometimes being confusing as to whether the music is actually in the scene or it's score. So we were very much throughout the film playing with that idea of, is the music in the world of the characters, or is it actually that meta level where they can't hear it? And a lot of the time it was sort of switching between the two. I don't know if you noticed towards the beginning there was the bar scene, and then we went to Ellie and Beatrix, getting dressed to go out, and it sort of went from source in the kind of bar to that kind of score to their, getting dressed, and that sort of underscoring that idea. So we were playing with that all the way through the film. The Chocolate Oyster theme, which was sort of written as like a main title, was very much influenced by there's actually a French band called Nouvelle Vague, if some of you might know that. They do like bossa nova covers of like really kind of punk songs and stuff. And I've always loved them. Every time I'm on a road trip, I listen to Nouvelle Vague. And so as soon as Steve was talking to me about the film, I went, oh, I know exactly what to do with this. And so that was a big influence. And there's another French singer called Camille, who some of you might have also heard of, who does a lot of vocal noises and sounds. So she kind of does a lot of beatboxing, kind of like... So you might not have been able to hear in the title track, but if you do listen to the soundtrack, you'll hear that actual main title song has a lot of those vocal noises because, of course, the theme of the Chocolate Oyster and Ellie kind of just going, oh, that had to become part of the music. So it actually became a percussive element of the main title track, was me standing there going, and kind of, like vomiting up the chocolate oyster. I also realised as well that like part of this influence was that kind of gypsy jazz idea as well. So Charlie, who's an amazing jazz guitarist and very great friend of mine, as soon as I sort of knew what we were dealing with, I rang Charlie and said, hey, want to come over? He said, yes, I do. That was the big thing. So that Chocolate Oyster theme also reappeared at the end. If you noticed, the very last scene was actually musically, thematically the same material as the opening title and the music that was on when she was eating the chocolate oyster. It was just a very, very different iteration of the theme because we were sort of going back to that sort of nostalgic idea of that sort of very nostalgic kind of jazz that would kind of make you feel a little bit sad and a little bit happy at the same time, which was essentially what we knew we were dealing with. There was sort of hope and despair all in that one moment, and that all had to be communicated somehow through what we did musically. So Steve and I worked very closely together to kind of, try and realise all those ideas, which I think we did really successfully. And I loved working on this film. I was just really grateful.
There are no establishing shots. Tell us about that choice.
Yeah, and that was on purpose. I'm loath to go into great detail because I'll sound even wankier than I am. Again, from day one, the idea with this film is that if you watch it in 20 or 30 years' time, that it's like a time capsule to what it's like being in a millennial kind of right now in the eastern suburbs. So we purposely didn't want it to feel like a dramatic narrative. We wanted it to be as much as possible like a documentary. So the idea being somebody just like picked up a camera and was just kind of there, didn't, just going back and forth like you would with a Super 8 camera, and nothing was contrived, except the opening shot, obviously, which was totally contrived.
Thanks very much, everyone, for being here with us.